Thank you for that, Sandy. Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Door County. My name is Jan Freisack, and I'm honored to be your service leader today. Good work getting here this morning. And for those of you that didn't make it, we're still glad to have you with us online. Together, we'd like to extend a warm welcome to all in the greeting in our bulletin, which sums up who we are as a congregation. It's printed. Whoever you are, wherever you come from, and wherever you are on your spiritual journey, we welcome you. In this place, there's room for your questions, your stories, your laughter, your doubt, your grief, and your most authentic self. We aspire to be a community of unconditional love, and we welcome you. A special welcome to those who might be visiting today for the first time, or the first time in a long time. We invite you to stand and introduce yourself and tell us where you're from and what brought you here today. Do we have any visitors?
I'm not a visitor, but I represent a visitor. This is Michelle Koch, Jennifer's sister from Rockford.
Oh.
And she said part of this concept goes against one of her core beliefs, which we haven't discussed yet, but I had permission to introduce her. So
Welcome, Jennifer. No, not Jennifer. Michelle, Jennifer's sister. You two look alike. A special, very special welcome to our guest speaker, Jeff Piercy, a social justice warrior who has returned to us from his UU congregation in Milwaukee. We're so happy to have you back. Welcome, Jeff. Please remember to silence your phones. And if you have difficulty hearing, just raise your hand and we'll try and adjust that. And please join us after the service in the gathering room for fellowship and coffee and conversation. And then our talk pack discussion will continue in here when you hear the chimes. Are there any other announcements? Cindy.
Thank you. Good morning, Cindy Nelson. I actually have two announcements today. One is that in the February newsletter, you probably read it very thoroughly, I'm sure, but this is a reminder that on February 21st, the Caring Committee is sponsoring a 2-hour cyber technology Be Safe on the Internet. The quantum technology folks are coming up to give this talk to us. And they have done this in a variety of settings. And my understanding is we learn a lot in those 2 hours. Mm-hmm. Please sign up. We do have to be prepared for the number of people that show. And so there is a sign up out there. So please think of doing that. The other thing is have a heart. People are still hungry. Visiting with the United Way folks, Door of Life, which is the food center that we tend to bring ours to, is in desperate need. So as a congregation, we are asking you to maybe think red this month, okay? Spaghetti sauce, pizza sauce, ketchup, tomatoes. And of course, it's Valentine's Day, and wouldn't it be nice if there were some few chocolate hearts thrown in for these folks who can't afford them? So think cybersecurity and think giving a little extra this month. Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy. Any other announcements?
Okay, well, I have one.
Okay.
Most of you know that I love gardening. And I have been tasked with applying several thousand labels to little plant stakes for our upcoming Master Gardener annual plant fair in May, end of May. So we're going to have a luncheon label. Sarah put a little sign up on the board February 12th from 11:30 to 2, and we'll see how many labels we can get affixed to plant stakes in that period of time.
Okay,
you can
great.
Always ask any questions, but please sign up.
Okay, let's continue with our chalice lighting, and I'm going to invite Cindy Steele to come up and light the chalice for us. Our reading today is Hopefulness in Bad Times by Howard Zinn. I'd like to share the thoughts of Howard, an American historian, playwright, philosopher, and World War II veteran. To be hopeful in bad times is not just foolishly romantic. It is based in the fact that human history is a history not only of cruelty, but also of compassion, sacrifice, courage, and kindness. What we choose to emphasize in this complex history will determine our lives. If we see only the worst, it destroys our capacity to do something. If we remember those times and places, and there are so many, where people have behaved magnificently, this gives us the energy to act and at least the possibility of sending this spinning top of a world in a different direction. And if we do act in however small a way, we don't have to wait for some grand utopian future. The future is an infinite succession of presents, and to live now as we think human beings should live, in defiance of all that is bad around us, is itself a marvelous victory. Please stand and join in the singing of our hymn. It's on an insert in your bulletin. And Carol will help lead us, When Jesus Went to Egypt, and then remain standing.
When Jesus went to Egypt, safe on his mother's arms, his parents stayed beside him to keep him safe from harm. And when they crossed the border, they were allowed to be together, seeking refuge, a holy family. On God we pray for children and families coming here, now facing separation and filled with grief and fear. For children loved and treasured are ripped from loving kin. This deed by any measure is torture, it's a sin. Oh God, you like a mother who won't forsake her own. You're like a loving father who welcomes his son home. Now give us by your Spirit the strength to challenge wrong, to seek the best for children and keep all families strong.
We gather together to seek knowledge and wisdom, to explore freely the vast reaches of mind and spirit, to celebrate within a caring community those truths, ancient and modern, which give meaning and direction to our lives. From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and faith arise. Let peace goodwill on earth be sung, in every land, by every tongue. Be seated. Being in a congregation like this, we find that our joys are amplified and our concerns are lessened by sharing them with one another in a safe and accepting environment. If you have something to share, please keep in mind that the service is live and saved on the internet. And don't share about someone else without their permission. Do we have any joys or concerns?
Thank you. This is Cindy Steele, and I am celebrating an anniversary. As of this month, I have been a Unitarian Universalist musician for 50
Oh
years.
my goodness.
Marilyn Hansodia with the weekly report on the Smythes, who are hunkered down as they have been for a very long time. Mary has been in the hospital since December 26th. You know what today is. Actually, tomorrow is probably the reason for concern. She's going to have a procedure on her heart, draining a lot of fluid that's accumulating around her heart and creating some problems in that regard. So keep her in your thoughts in the next few days. I think it's a rather critical time in her treatment course.
Cindy Nelson, I'd like to share some joyful news about two of our members. Yesterday, Judy and Mike Broad, who we all know worked terribly hard, but they were honored by the Democratic Wisconsin or Door County Dems as volunteers of the year, and I can't imagine anyone who deserved it more. So
Yeah.
thank you, Judy and Mike.
Yes, congratulations, you two. I have a joy and maybe a concern, but you can all help with this. Our poets, we are having 2 poets a week from Wednesday. We've changed our poetry night from the first Wednesday of the month to the second. And I want to make sure that there's a good congregation here for them. They're really both wonderful, and they are together at Right On taking, no, they're writers in residence that week. So that's why they're going to come on Wednesday night, the 12th. And I'm going to be in Sicily. I really hate to miss it.
All right. It's time for our offertory. We give to remind ourselves of how much we've been given and that we're part of something bigger than ourselves. So please give generously. Now let's take a moment to quiet our minds and prepare our hearts for the message Jeff will be bringing us.
Good morning. This is my home away from home. It's always a pleasure to be back here. And then I come home. I had been traveling for 26 hours, 15 hours in the air, 11 hours in five airports. When I left Sierra Leone, it was 105 degrees. Actually, it cooled down to 105 degrees. When I got to Milwaukee, it was a cold March evening. I walked into my house and I flipped on the lights. They came on. I went to the bathroom and flushed the toilet. I went to the kitchen and turned on the tap and drank a glass of cold water. I took a hot shower, a long hot shower, a really long, really hot shower. In the village I left in Sierra Leone, none of these things were possible. There was no electricity, no running water, no sanitation, and a shower was a cold bucket of water and a ladle. And then I come home. During very emotionally low periods in that first 2 weeks in the village, I swore I would never do this again. Even when I got home, I told my wife that it was my last visit to Africa. The Africa of Sierra Leone is not the beautiful part of Africa, of safaris and big game and lovely vistas. As a result of the colonialism of the British and a 10-year civil war, Sierra Leone is desperately poor and lacks almost any infrastructure. Traveling to Sierra Leone is a process of shedding the armor of privilege and materialism. From a climate-controlled airplane to a hot terminal to a truck that has no air conditioning to roads that are only semi-passable, each stage raises the sense of vulnerability. For a time on return, I am sensitized to the privileges of living in this country. There is always a gnawing realization that the people in Sierra Leone who shared their lives with me and befriended me, and they continue their daily struggles to find clean water, something to eat, a job, school for their children, and any type of health care. Because of distance, privilege, and luxury, I quickly lose sight of these people and their country. But something kept me engaged with the organization I volunteer for in Africa. Something has propelled me to return to that village 3 more times over the last 6 years. Those of us paying attention often become energized and motivated by the plight of the disadvantaged people around the world. There's a surge of concern and action. Then we move on with our daily lives and wait for the next urgent issue that presses for our attention. And of course, now we don't have to look very far. I have had a wonderful experience of photographing people in the marginalized situations all over the world. Their struggles are ongoing and often generational. But then I come home. What sustains my energy and commitment to social justice? How do others successfully remain energized to a cause? And now my home is threatened. A political change has swept the country and indeed is part of a worldwide movement to repressive forms of government. There is a daily reminder that over half of the country accepts this and is opposed to everything I hold dear. I want to run away and hide and wrap myself in a cloak of my privilege and stay safe. It is hard not to succumb. I see some heads nodding in agreement. If I was in the South, some would say, "Amen, brother." As I contemplated this question of sustained involvement and action, I returned to the thoughts from Dr. Martin Luther King, who said, "You may be 38 years old as I happen to be, and one day some great opportunity stands before you and calls you to stand up for some great principle, some great issue, some great cause, and you refuse to do it because you are afraid. You refuse to do it because you want to live longer. You're afraid that you will lose your job. You're afraid that you'll be criticized and that you will lose your popularity. Or you're afraid that somebody will stab you or shoot you or bomb your house. so you refuse to take a stand. Well, you may go on to live until you are 90, but you're as dead at 38 as you would be at 90. And the cessation of breathing in your life is but the belated announcement of an earlier death of the spirit. Unquote. It's always good to quote Dr. Martin Luther King. Engagement and perseverance. What causes them? What sustains them? Are they trainable skills? For answers to this, I began a critical look at my own behavior and motivation. I will reference my multi-year work in Africa for this talk, but I also reached out to some Unitarian Universalist members from Milwaukee, who I have admired for their sustained engagement in causes. Bruce Wiggins, Terry Wiggins, Janet Nordstrom, Pete Konieczny were all incredibly helpful for this talk. They provided me with thoughts about engagement and perseverance. Unitarian Universalist congregations are replete with people who are similarly engaged. We recognize 2 of them today. I discovered that there are some common themes regarding engagement and sustaining effort. I gleaned 6 general areas that are in common with these people of uncommon commitment. The first common theme is having a supportive and sustaining partner. Janet Nordstrom recalled Marlo telling her early in their marriage that she should follow her bliss. And then he behaved in a way that proved these were not words only. As I have said, there are often times when the difficulties of working in Sierra Leone seem overwhelming. Prior to my last trip, I was agonizing over whether to return. I'm over 70 years old, and the rigors of village life and of travel with all my camera gear can be overwhelming. The decision was made when my wife, Jerry, said, "You are called to work in Africa. You have to do it. Quit whining. Get ready and go." Now, that decision is not glib. Making that commitment means that she will need to pick up my household responsibilities for over a month. There will be no vacation this year. My old Jeep will have to get another year older, and we'll need to dip a bit into our savings. All of my work, or I should say all of her and my work in Africa, is pro bono. Without my partner at my back, it would be impossible. In many ways, following through with a commitment to a cause is a selfish act. It takes time and finances and energy from family and friends. Is there understanding and support and encouragement that allows a level of engagement that would otherwise be impossible? It also bears mentioning that these trips average from $5,000 to $6,000 apiece. I weigh with the organization whether my work there is more valuable than the donation would be. Charity tourism can sometimes invest in our own egos at the expense of the organizations we hope to serve. The second common theme is community. Each person I talked to talked about not doing it alone. Terry Wiggins talked about being on board at UU Ministry for the Earth and the ongoing support and connection with people involved in that issue. Bruce Wiggins said, all the way back to seeing and experiencing the power of community, participating in anti-war rallies during the Vietnam War shaped me and are unforgettable. Pete Konieczny agreed. I'm always meeting people who inspire me, either by their example or because their story and their experience cause me to see an issue or a problem as something to work on that triggers both my anger or sense of injustice, as well as my hope or optimism of being able to make a difference. My work in Africa is connected with the Pan-African Rural Health and Social Services, or PRESS. A former employee of mine had asked if I would consider helping his dad and his organization. That's how I met Dr. Samuel Cormoy. He had escaped Sierra Leone with his family during a devastating 10-year civil war. Some say 12 because the after effects were devastating. Following the war, he founded PRESS and began to return to help the remnants of his village in the Yong Chiefdom. His strong Methodist faith sustains the organization. When I first became involved with PRESS, I was put off by their reference to their work as a ministry. Every meeting begins and ends with a prayer. Several ministers are on the board of directors. When times are tough, I get an email from the chairman of the board, Sam, asking us to fast and pray. One day while in Africa, Sam turned to me and he said, "You are a gift from God." It was an astounding statement that I immediately denied. He said, no, I was fasting and praying that someone would come along and help me with the board. And the next week, we met. Being in the presence of people with such an abiding faith has had a very deep influence on me. I surround myself there with people who approach life in a way I admire, even if I don't emulate. I always feel supported and loved and thanked. Maybe you should call your volunteers a gift from God. It might help. The third theme is an accurate assessment of your skills and expertise and a goodness of fit. All of my informants for this sermon spoke of the vast array of needs and the limitations of their own abilities. I'm trying to think if I'll skip this or not. Bruce Wiggins said, "Learning to say no in addition to yes, I have had a tendency in my life to take on too much and tend to get overcommitted. I have had to say no to some requests in order to maintain a family life, protect my health and sanity, to be able to continue social justice work. It is a partly learning what my abilities are and what my time allows me to do. As a young man, I was a photographer on a daily newspaper. I always admired the documentary work being done by photographers like Father Don Dahl, Sebastian Salgado, and others. When I returned to photojournalism after my retirement, I set a course to take on longer-term projects. I wanted to tell stories of people marginalized by currents that were no fault of their own. The weapon I chose to use in this fight was my camera. The fourth theme is the cause itself, and even more importantly, the people. Dr. Cormoy says, "I always try to focus broadly on health and social services in Africa, but zero on the immediate life-threatening needs. There is joy in seeing a hungry child get some meal because the parent is employed, thanks to our efforts, or some international supporter provides them with breakfast, or a child who would otherwise not go to high school if they were not sponsored, or the very simple smile of a young boy or girl who is handed clean gym shoes that actually fit." This was echoed by Pete Konezny. I would say my engagement flows from my connection and immediate contact with the people affected by injustice. It is important for me to have that ongoing contact so as not to be addressing issues as abstractions. I will never forget my first visit to the village. We often were busy, so we'd eat an early breakfast and a late dinner, usually some kind of a stew with some kind of meat. I never knew what, and cassava greens over rice. It was the first time I ate rat, was in the village. Not bad if you're hungry. Our food was sufficient and plentiful. I learned early on that kids would gather near where we ate. When we were finished, we would set our plates on the ground. I get emotional every time I say this. And kids would come over and lick the plates clean, suck the bones to be sure everything was eaten. I learned to leave a lot of food on my plate. The image of a child sucking the bones of the chicken I had eaten will never leave me. It is hard to sustain commitment to an organization as the human foibles and difficulties emerge. It is particularly hard to sustain commitment to work in Africa, where there are constant setbacks and frustrations. But each time I see my enthusiasm wane, I think of a small girl sucking a chicken bone, discarded from my plate, and my perspective changes. The fifth theme is learning and evolving. Each of the people who helped me with this sermon addressed the issue of deeper involvement or deeper evolution of their spiritual life as a result of their long-term engagement. Janet Nordstrom spoke of the sustaining power of music, art, and theater for both her and Marlo. Bruce Wiggins identified First Church's Reverend Jennifer's admonition that a spiritual life is crucial to social justice work. He quoted Reverend Jennifer's candidating sermon that without a spiritual life and a spiritual dimension, social change people either burn out themselves or others or devolve into bickering, name-calling, arguing, and undoing the good they're trying to do. This can be counteracted by a commitment to self-care and spiritual growth. For me, my work in Africa has changed me. It has exposed me to a tribal culture that I can observe, participate in, but understand at a very superficial level. At a deeper level, it leaves me with an awareness of the transience of life, an understanding that our impact on the world is really only in the way we love each other. Our birth, life, and death are without meaning in themselves unless we have shown the ability to love others, and that all life is short. I was walking in the bush one day with Dr. Cormoy. He was saying that snake bite is one of the leading causes of death in the village because there's no way to keep anti-venom cold. A bite inevitably leads to death. I was astonished. I said, well, what about me? What happens if I get bit? And Sam said, well, we'd warn you. I admit there is something humorous in that statement, but living for a time in a village where life expectancy is short and life-threatening situations are ever present separates me from the privilege of healthcare on demand. The sixth theme is hope and expectations. It seems that small victories are the best we can hope for, but us seeing long-term solutions is improbable. Dr. Cormoy says, I stay in mission expecting nothing in return from the recipients of my work, not even a thank you. That way I will never be disappointed by anything or anyone. Nothing surprises me at all. I go in expecting everything, good or bad. Pete holds a bit of optimism. Ultimately, I think I stay engaged by seeing out engagement with people who are the victims of injustice, and because of my fundamental optimism that injustice can be overcome. Bruce Wiggins talked about redefining the word hope. Many people seem to want hope to carry on, but they usually mean hope for a good outcome. Joanna Macy and Václav Havel have a better understanding of hope. It is a way of being active, a way of life. It is choosing to be active, recognizing that it is better than the alternative choice. It is a life view. After several years working with this one village in Africa, I tend to agree with Bruce. In what remains of my short life, I will never see substantial changes in Africa. There have been changes in the village, a hospital, schools, better agriculture. But the overwhelming corruption and lack of infrastructure, all results of colonialism, still remain. Bruce provided me with one of my favorite quotes from Wes Jackson. If you're working on a problem that can be solved in your lifetime, you're thinking too small. Well, here we are at the end of a monumental political month that many of us would describe as devastating. The turnover in our government is frightening to many. How do we respond? How do we renew our engagement? How do we keep from sticking our heads in the sand? Timothy Snyder, in his wonderful series of essays in the book On Tyranny, which I cannot recommend enough, begins with a chapter, Do Not Obey in Advance. He says that most of the power authoritarianism is freely given. In times like these, individuals think ahead of what a more repressive government will want, and then offer themselves without being asked. A citizen who adapts in this way is teaching power what it can do. I highly recommend Snyder's book, 20 Lessons for Our Time. But here we are in Door County on a beautiful morning. Well, it is. and a bastion of privilege. What can we do to keep the fires of freedom burning, or at least smoldering? Here are a final few thoughts. As Unitarians, we have a spiritual mandate to engage in social justice issues. We must be a people of optimism. We must each personally identify a cause that tugs at our heart. We must marshal our internal resources to enter the fray. We must encourage our fellows in their fight, even if it's not our own. We must bind them up when they are broken by the odds. We must teach our children by our example. We must sit down, shut up, and listen when we are confronted by the lived experience of people who suffer. And finally, perhaps the hardest one, we must outlove our enemies, choosing to show compassion and mercy. Megawitch, thank you. Mataki Oison, for all my relations.
Thank you for that, Jeff. Please stand. And we will sing together hymn 1028.
From the light of days remembered, burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the stories of our living brings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion mount to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, and our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future
Now I'd like to invite Cindy to come back up to extinguish our chalice with these words by Joy Marjo, who is a Native American poet, musician, and author. The Fight. The rising sun paints the feet of night-crawling enemies, and they scatter into the burning hills. I have fought each of them. I know them by name from before I could speak. I've used every weapon to make them retreat, yet they return every night. If I don't keep guard, they elbow through the opening in faith, tear the premise of trust, and stick their shields through the doubt of smoke to challenge me. I grow tired of the heartache of every small and large war, passed from generation to generation. But it is not in me to give up. I was taught to give honor to the house of warriors, which cannot exist without the house of peacemakers.